What's happening, everyone? Art at Patience Metal Fab, and I'm out in the shop today bringing you another episode on our Group B rally build. Now, before I get started on that, I want to thank everyone for watching that series because it's been really fun for me in particular to watch the view count and the followers go up. It's been our most popular series by far. So I'd be curious in the comments, what do you guys like in particular about it, and what can I present you more with? Because there's plenty more content to come on that car, tons of stuff for us to do, so I want to showcase the things that you want to watch. Now, today is going to be a particularly exciting episode because we're going to be assembling the cage and doing final welds on it, and that means the buildup is really gearing up. Now, over there, Max is working away on cleaning up the rest of the piping and grinding away on the chassis so he can start those welds, and we're going to start the construction on it. So I'm going to see how far he's gotten along, and then we're going to be filming all week long to show you guys the final product. Max just headed out for the day, so I figured I'd give you an update on the cage assembly. He got pretty far, starting with that main hoop, and then he got these rear bars in. You can see that they're tacked. One of the most important parts, however, is the roof bar setup. If you recall a couple videos ago, we had more of a conventional X-brace through here, but we went to this Y design because once we fitted the seat with the driver, there just wasn't enough clearance for him with a helmet. So now he's got plenty of clearance here. You can see the headliners in, so we've got an optimal setup. Gary, Max was doing a really great job on this cage, and then for no reason, he decided to cut into the body of the car and ruined it all. Could you explain this to me?
So you're giving away all our ship in a bottle secrets here. Thought process that goes into the design of a cage to think about exactly how it is logistically that we're actually going to get to all the welds. Not just the ones on the top, but spots like this where the door bar is hidden behind the pillar. You can see we've got all these bars in except for a couple very specific bars that we know we have access to after the fact of putting it all back in. But what that allows us to do is a little bit more flexibility in the tubing. If that bar was in there, it would restrict the ability to actually weld that to the foot, to the actual torque box underneath. So yeah, I mean, there's more so than just cutting some holes and dropping it to get to the top. There's a lot of thought process that goes into how you're going to get to each joint, because there's not a cage that we've built that's out there that doesn't have every single joint welded all the way around.
And this is really in line with our reputation. Even before I started working here, the big thing I heard about Patience Metal Fab is the tolerances were super tight, the cages were welded everywhere, because that's not indicative of every shop out there, right? Some shops just skip out on welding the top side.
Yeah, we've got a few videos we've made and pictures we've had of cars that have come to us from reputable shops who will remain nameless, but we find unwelded joints. Do yourself a favor, next time you're at a racetrack or a show, go feel around above some of the joints on people's cars. You'd be surprised how many do not have all the joints welded. It's crazy.
And in order to do that, these are the extra steps that you have to take. So Max is going to be welding the top side of this, then eventually it's going to go back up and we'll weld these up, grind them like it never happened. And if you guys ever get a chance to see this car in person, you're going to see exactly how much work went into making the tolerances this tight. Max just headed out for the day, and the cage work that he did is virtually complete. The only thing we're really missing is the harness bar, and that's contingent on a couple of other things going in, which I'll talk about. But this is a really special cage, so I wanted to get Gary involved to give us a little bit of a breakdown on what makes this so cool, besides the visual aspects of it, and what we did that's a little bit above and beyond what you would see in a normal caged car.
The unique piece of this is this car was obviously originally homologated in Europe, and the issue you run into with Europe is metric tubing. We don't have metric tubing here in very good supply. Nobody's got metric dies on their benders, and the material that it calls for, the CD45S, virtually doesn't exist. So we adapted this using chromoly, which is the standard engineering acceptable crossover from France's material, the CD45S, to the US engineering standards. And then we had to adapt to the diameters and the wall thicknesses. So it's a little bit of a juggling game, but we were able to do it with 1.75" 0.95 wall and 1.5" 0.95 wall to meet homologation rule.
The one really weird thing about this cage, if you're noticing the details, is you see little bolt heads, but it's all fully welded onto the frame. So why am I seeing these here? Right there, right there.
So it goes back to the FIA homologation piece again. Technically, the feet have to be bolted into the car to be an FIA homologated roll cage. And so what we do to appease that is we stack the plates. The main plate, landing plate, gets nuts welded on the back side of it. That gets welded to the car, which is pretty standard issue for how they do it over there. And then the actual plate that's welded to the foot has holes and bolts down. Now, nobody really wants their cage bolted in, so we go ahead and weld everything in anyway to finish it off. And then we actually tack the bolts in place so that they can't back out and get loose.
I would guess one of the big challenges with a cage like this is just the compact nature of this car. There's really not a whole lot of room in here, especially once the firewall and the seats and the fuel cell and everything are in. So how did Max kind of get around that?
You want me to climb in? We can really demonstrate how small this thing is.
Yeah, join me in here.
I mean, whenever you do a cage like this, obviously all our cages are tight, but everything has to be up and away. So you see a lot of kind of organically shaped bars where they've got bends in places additionally to really get them to tuck up tight. This car on top of it, obviously we got the headliner in here, which, you know, you guys did a good segment on. But yeah, it is a challenge to put somebody who's, what's Brian, 6'2", 6'3" probably, into a car this size. I mean, it becomes really important to do exactly this, high and tight.
So it all fits, structurally it's sound, and it's just unique. You won't see a cage like this. The gusset work especially I think is really cool here. Is that just kind of a visual touch?
It is, but it does certainly serve as a structural piece. When we brought these two bars together, we were obviously able to weld them from the top side when the cage was down below, and we got some stitches in here. But it is nice whenever you get a run like this, instead of just having welds deep down in that root, is to actually lay a gusset plate over the top of it. It significantly strengthens that joint.
Another cool feature of this cage is it's not just inside the cab of the car, it actually goes all the way out here like I showed you guys earlier. These would be referred to as anti-intrusion bars. What's really the purpose of that? Structural rigidity, I assume?
Yeah, that's really to tie the tower in, and it's kind of a take on an anti-intrusion bar. There will be an additional true anti-intrusion bar added to this cage where it'll protect the floor area from anything coming up through. That'll be done after pedals and stuff are in to make sure that we're not conflicting. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, it ties up the cage, obviously your front suspension mounting point. The idea at the end of the day is for the body on this thing to sort of just be a wrap around a tubular structure. So being tied into the suspension points here, tied into the suspension points in the back, and then steering column mounted to the cage. As much built to the cage as possible to make the body just kind of wrap around it.
One thing I realized while editing a full-length start-to-finish cage episode like this is it looks really quick. I mean, at the end of the day, this is probably going to be a 12, 14-minute video, and although there have been a few other videos where we've done the cage prep, this is really the welding and the finalization of this. It still looks a lot faster than it took. So how many hours would you say is in a cage like this?
So typically a regular cage for us will be anywhere 50, 60, maybe 70 hours if it's real elaborate. As soon as you start throwing in headliner like this, the additional work that was done, the way this cage was built and then disassembled completely for blasting them back in, there's well over 100 hours into this cage.
Kind of gives you an idea of how intense this build actually is. So from here, we've got a ton of stuff yet to do. Now the cage is finalized. We've got the firewall pieces in, the fuel cell below that we're gonna kind of debut in the next video. We're gonna get seats in here and get started working on the pedals, and now it's really trying to fit as much of the stuff that we can in here around the cage. Then moving on to suspension and front end pieces. We'll eventually have the hood here, the bumper, and it's gonna start looking like a real car at one point. Now, the big question mark is the engine. Do we know what we're gonna be doing quite yet?
No, I mean, it's gonna be the original motor at this point, it sounds like. The challenge right now is finding somebody to do the machine work necessary before putting that thing back together. So that is the outlier on the timeline, absolutely. But, you know, on a build like this, details like that matter. So it's worth waiting for.
It is worth waiting for, and it's worth watching this series. This is probably going to be episode 10 or so, and we've got probably double that to go. So hopefully you guys are enjoying the content. If you are, subscribe to the page, like the video, share this around, and we'll see you in the next one.